Okay. So, hey everyone, my name is Andrew Gonzalez. I work for Braintrace, and I just want to thank everybody for attending this co-hosted webinar with our partners, OneLogin. So many of you here today, you're already clients of ours, or you've spoken to us in the past. But for those of you who do not know us, Braintrace offers a unique blend of technology solutions and managed services that cater to the whole cybersecurity landscape. These solutions include MDR, managed network traffic analysis, we do SOC as a service, MSP advisory service, the whole gambit. For all attendees of this webinar, besides the stake that we're offering, we'll be offering a special discount for any attendee who is interested in external pen test or risk assessment. After this webinar, we'll send you more info on this service. Lastly, at the end of this webinar, we'll provide you a link to a form, a Google form. You are to fill this out, and then this is where you'll put your address, so that we know where to send the stakes to. So that's very important. I'll put this on the chat screen towards the end of the webinar, and that's where you'll fill the whole form out and put your address there. And without further ado, I just want to introduce you to our presenter today, Trevor Hunting. He's a solutions engineer at OneLogin, and he'll be presenting about the top security challenges businesses face for the remainder of 2020, challenges and solutions to enabling a secure workforce environment, and how to simplify access to critical apps and tools for your remote workforce. For those of you who've not heard of OneLogin, they are a cloud IAM provider and a leader in a 1 billion identity marketplace that safely and securely connects users to their applications anytime, anywhere. Having said all that, Trevor, please take it away.
All right, thanks, Andrew. So I'm a solution engineer here over at OneLogin. And so what I do day to day is talk with customers, talk with prospects about the challenges that they're seeing, and I generally design solutions for them. And oftentimes that has OneLogin as a smaller component of a larger architecture, right? So I get exposure to a lot of different challenges, and I wanted to share that with everyone today and talk about the different approaches that people take and how things have changed with the recent kind of COVID situation. All right. So obviously, COVID-19 was a huge disruption to most industries, right? It's presenting a lot of challenges to society as a whole. And these challenges have resulted in significant business disruptions with social distancing, traveling restrictions, stay-at-home orders, lots of online purchasing, and most importantly for us here, forcing everyone to work from home. And these things have fundamentally shifted the ways that a lot of us do work. Now, some of these disruptions have actually benefited us in terms of accelerating the pace of digital transformation out of necessity, right? But many companies are struggling with the rapid pace of that transformation and seeing that a lot. So this crisis has pushed businesses to adopt new technologies, new ways of working, and enabling remote workforce. So previously, businesses that didn't rely heavily on cloud and cloud technologies and remote management tools and models have had to operate in very different ways now. So we're having to shift towards remote. So there's a lot going on out there. Hackers are really taking advantage of this crisis, targeting the most vulnerable organizations and honestly exploiting them in a time of chaos. And I was looking at some statistics this morning, and as of May 2nd, the FBI reported an 800% surge in reported cyber crime. So it's not a small uptick. We're talking 8x in the amount of activity out there with regards to hackers. So this is rearing its ugly face in the form of social engineering, phishing, ransomware, right? So let's talk a little bit about how we can kind of lock things down. All right, so traditional security approaches, obviously no longer enough. A lot of us were really comfortable within our perimeter, which was essentially a firewall, or being at the office and knowing who was there and being able to control all of those machines and all of those people safely from your office. And that's not really what we can do anymore, right? So with the new hybrid workforce, those traditional security approaches really weren't enough, or they were enough, but they're not now. And we're going to break this down into 4 components to help define a model to put those controls in place. So we'll start talking about end users, identity, communication, and then applications and data access. Those are kind of the 4 pillars of how we'll approach this. So we need to start with people, your end users, and it really begins with a consistent message around awareness training and making sure your end users understand different scams and social engineering techniques that hackers are using. So training and awareness should be an ongoing effort that you do with your end users. But during these times, it's really important to get very specific with that training around the types of techniques that are being used, so that your users are even more aware of what it is they could potentially fall victim to. And there's a number of services out there that offer continuous and ongoing training for these types of things. So one piece of that is that it's really important that you have an acceptable use policy if you don't already. So for those of you who may not be familiar with this, essentially it's a set of guidelines for end users to understand what's acceptable use of their laptop or their computer, for example, when they're on the internet or when they're utilizing work applications. So for example, don't let your kids use your computer to play video games, don't visit, high-risk websites, don't leave your laptop in your car, things like that. And also, you're going to be asking your end users to utilize new technologies in a lot of cases. And in a lot of cases, those are going to be deployed remotely, right? So you're not going to be able to sit down with people. And in some cases, they're never going to have used that specific technology before. So it's important that you set up training sessions where your end users can get educated on the technology that they need to use to do their job successfully. Now, finally, it's important to have your end users understand the proper process to follow if they do, in fact, click on something they shouldn't, for example. End users will make mistakes. This is a guarantee, right? They click on things, they may open documents that they shouldn't. And it's important to build a culture within your company where your end user is not afraid to report to you when they've done something that they shouldn't have done. They can't be scared of getting in trouble or reaching out to IT or to security if they fell victim to an attack, because obviously the quicker you can react to that, the better off you are. So making it clear what that process is and that they may not be penalized for it as long as they're able to get that over to you as quickly as possible. Now, as we shift to identity, you need to understand who it is and what is trying to access your technologies. And this is obviously a very disruptive time for your end users. And the more you can simplify their use of technology and increase the ease and convenience of that technology, the better. So I've laid out some technologies here that are commonly used. And in most cases, you'll use a mixture of tools to check all of these boxes. This is really a best case scenario, right? So first here we have single sign-on. So this is going to give access, secure access, to all of a user's applications, and ideally we are removing passwords from the equation altogether. That's really the goal, right? Using security tokens and things like that. And this generally will also reduce IT help desk tickets with regards to problems accessing things or resetting passwords. And with SSO tools, oftentimes comes automation for user lifecycle management. So onboarding, offboarding, day-to-day changes, a lot of times that's going to be baked into an SSO tool. All right, now the second piece of this equation is going to be a mobile device management solution. Now that's going to be taking care of things like managing the company device, making sure we have the right security software installed on each device, making sure it's encrypted, and giving you a lot of remote capabilities like the ability to lock or wipe a device if you fire someone or some sort of security incident occurs. All right, so typically what I would see with a lot of my customers is an SSO tool combined with a mobile device management tool, so providing access and then also controlling the hardware that the people are using. All right, now if you need to have a firewall, if you do have on-prem applications or resources that people need to access, a lot of people are shifting towards a cloud-based firewall because on-prem solutions generally have less flexibility and may not provide what you need for your remote workforce. And if we are going to have that firewall in place, we are going to have on-premises resources that people need to access. We'll need to utilize a VPN where needed. And obviously, this isn't a new technology, but we're seeing nowadays a broader adoption of this for remote workers. And incorporating multi-factor authentication into that VPN access is a great step for increasing security. And lastly here, sometimes we see CASB tools, so cloud basically access security broker tools that allow you to see the actions that your users are taking, report on it, and in a lot of cases have automation steps built into if-then scenarios. Now, next we need to think about all of our communication platforms, right? Email, chat, video. In this current threat environment, multi-factor authentication is critical for all of these applications, not just high risk or critical applications, because this is commonly a vector for attack, right? If you think of phishing, if I can get control of someone's email account, especially an executive, and send emails from that account, it's a very dangerous scenario, right? I can get people to click on links, download things if I got access to the right inbox. So with the use of these communication technologies, there is an obligation to the business to ensure these applications are configured in a secure manner. And oftentimes, vendors provide documentation on how to securely configure these applications, for example, Zoom. And end-to-end encryption is nothing new. It's relatively standard, both including here. And secure email gateways, most companies have these already, which blocks malicious emails to your end users. Right. Now, the final area I'm going to talk about here is application access. And this is where multi-factor authentication is critical. So one of the challenges that I've seen is that when companies grow quickly, users often have access to a lot more tools than they need, or terminated employees or contractors often still have access to applications after they're no longer working with your company, which presents another problem. So we'll want to validate each user, make sure that they have the right level of access with regards to access in those tools and even having them. And we'll also want to offer enhanced MFA. So determine the critical applications that require additional layers of authentication, for example, banking applications, HR applications, things like that. And we'll also want to have logging and alerts set up to understand when your users have done something abnormal or potentially malicious, because most user behavior is pretty predictable. So an example of something that's unpredictable, an end user logs into your CRM platform who typically doesn't do, bulk data downloads, and all of a sudden is doing this at 3 a.m., right? If we have the right tools in place, we'll be able to identify that this is very strange behavior and act accordingly. And lastly, we'll want to disable non-business essential applications. So this ties back to enforcing that acceptable use policy. So it's important that people are not accessing non-essential apps on company devices. For example, streaming Netflix or buying things on websites, for example. Now, excuse me. Authentication is evolving. So to dig a little bit deeper into MFA specifically and where it's going, we need to understand where it's been, right? So it all started with static authentication, right? Something you know. That's a password, right? And unfortunately, the security of passwords has proven to be problematic. So from static authentication, we transitioned into multi-factor authentication, or MFA. And that was a combination of something you know, your password, and something you have or something you are. So something you have like a YubiKey, or something you are like your fingerprint, right? So combining those three things. Now, to address the problem of user experience and static MFA usage, authentication evolved into contextual authentication, where intelligence is used to help make smart decisions about the usage of MFA in unrisky scenarios, right? And this is where OneLogin specifically is going to have some tools to help you here. And we're moving towards continuous authentication and decentralized authentication. So not only taking all of the traditional things into account, what you know, what you have, what you are, your user's history, their current behavior, but we're going to be, if we're using all of these elegant solutions for risk analysis and passwordless authentication, doing continuous authentication, as in forcing someone or to reestablish trust, you know, every 30 minutes, is not going to be cumbersome. They won't even know authentication is happening because it's happening in the background, for example. They won't see anything. They won't be prompted for anything. They don't have to do MFA. So when it comes to passwordless, what we're talking about here is adding additional forms of MFA to ensure that we don't have to show the user any piece of this equation. So things like certificates on their work devices, or things like that risk analysis, where we take into account a ton of different variables with their current behavior, compare it to previous behavior. Maybe a piece of that is their geolocation, or the time of the day, or what device they're using, or what browser they're using, right? So if we can combine device trust with risk-based analysis, then oftentimes we don't need to have that user physically do anything. And that's really passwordless. And again, OneLogin can help in this area. So as far as the MFA piece of that is concerned, there is the ability to not have your users have to really take out their phones or take out a YubiKey or do anything for MFA while it's still essentially happening, right? So one of the ways to do this is by using risk-based analysis. So we have a OneLogin product here, which elevates and steps down the actions that we take based on how risky the action is that they're trying to perform, or I should say, how risky what their current behavior is, rather. So if, for example, they come in at low risk, let's just let them in, right? They've got their certificate, they're on their normal computer, it's the right time of day. If they come in at medium risk, maybe they're on a new browser or they're on a new IP address. Let's go ahead and just have them do that MFA. So this is where we do present them with something. But if they're coming in from, you know, a new computer, they're signing in from North Korea, whatever it is, we can just flat out block them access. So this kind of segues into, and I'd be remiss if I didn't pitch OneLogin a little bit, some of the things that OneLogin can do. So a lot of the things that I talked about here, it is going to take a mixture of products. So where OneLogin fits into this is providing access, so easy and secure access to applications with pre-built integrations for single sign-on, making it easy for admins to build out environments and scale, and unified access everywhere. So cloud environments, on-prem environments, hybrid environments, making sure we can bring all that together. We can also incorporate automated user lifecycle management, so making user onboarding, offboarding, day-to-day changes really seamless. Have you make that change in one place and have those changes trickle down into all of the applications that your users are using. And also will be able to help you scale your organization here by easing the workload of deploying applications or onboarding new users, you know, enabling new technologies, things like that. So what we use, what's in our tool belt here. We're not just a single sign-on provider. Obviously, that's one of our core services with a cloud directory as well, but we offer multi-factor authentication. So if you put an identity provider in front of your entire tool set, it's going to be one method for MFA, right? If you think about what it might look like today, you might have an MFA option for signing into G Suite, a different one for Microsoft, a different one for, signing into Zoom, right? You might have multiple different MFA options. If we can put something like an identity and access management solution in front of that, we can standardize on one or a couple things like biometric authentication or context-based authentication, right? And that segues into enhanced MFA. So contextual access based on risk is something that we offer. And single sign-on into on-premise applications. That's a product called Access. And what we can also do is extend authentication down onto users' devices. So if you have non-domain joined machines, as we see a lot of times with Macs, for example, there's no way to really control what passwords people are using or to enforce password policies or reset these, right? So we have products for both enforcing password resets, reset intervals, complexities, being able to remotely lock users out. We have products for that, as well as the certificate-based device trust that I talked about earlier. And we also have options for those people who are using remote desktops. So remoting into maybe their desktop that is physically at the office, right? And there's a whole bunch of other stuff we can do, but this is pretty relevant to what we were talking about today. All right. So I appreciate everyone's time. Hopefully that was useful. Happy to open it up to questions, comments, concerns, either about the product or any of the topics that we covered today. And Andrew, I'll let you pick and choose the people with questions.
Yeah, sure. So if you have any questions, you could either send on the chat, or at the bottom you could see there's the whole Q&A. Or even if you want to, you could just raise your hand and I can allow you to chat. So while you guys decide what to ask, note that on the chat, I just sent everyone a message, and that's like the document. It's a Google document where you fill out the information, then we'll know where to send the stakes to. That's now on the chat address. So, please click that now and, go ahead and fill that information out. But does anyone have any questions? Okay, hold on. Here's one question from Sue. Okay, Trevor, so what have you seen change most as we've gone remote?
A couple things. How IT helps people. So help desk functionalities. How are we doing that? We can't really walk over to anyone's desk anymore and help them out, right? So that's a big one. So making sure that you have the right tools in place to help people with password resets, which we can help with, or deploying software remotely, right? That's another big one that I've seen changes. Everyone was sent home so quickly, we couldn't say, hey, come here, give me your laptop, let's deploy some software. So people have had to, on the fly, figure out how to remotely deploy software, which has been one of the biggest changes. And one of the other big changes that we've seen is a shift away from classic domain authentication, where in a large proportion of cases, I would say people are on Windows devices, they're at the office, everything's kosher, right? They're on the network, everything's going through my domain controller. As soon as that user steps out of the office, it's been a few months now. Is that password still in sync? Is it not in sync? Do we have any utilities to help keep this user authenticating against that Active Directory or resetting their password? So there's been a large shift away from that model as well, the kind of centralized authentication of, okay, great, you're in the office, you're on a trusted device. Well, that kind of all goes to bits when people are not in the office. So that's been another one, as well as the need for MFA over most things, right? So a lot of people didn't have VPNs before. Well, now you have a VPN and you need to make sure that that's pretty secure. So a lot of people that previously considered multi-factor authentication as a nice to have are really looking at it now as a serious way to mitigate risk. It's no longer a nice to have, I would say. It's another large shift that I've seen with people that I've talked to.
Okay, anybody else have any questions for Trevor? All right, I think here's another one. This one's from Henry. Okay, Trevor, how can you secure third-party web software which does not integrate with SSO?
Sure. Yeah, so in most cases, we're talking about applications that, web applications that don't support modern authentication protocols like SAML or OpenID Connect. These are the mechanisms used for single sign-on. And it's the case especially for a lot of smaller software companies where they haven't gotten around to building that into their tools. So with OneLogin, we're able to also act as a password vault. I should say really a business password vault, in that we're not simply keeping track of a user's credentials and injecting them into the sign-in page. So, a user goes to their portal, they click an icon, it signs them in. That's great, but we need to take control, as IT admins, we need to take control over that so that it's more secure. So how do you do that if it's using usernames and passwords? Well, if the user is never given permission to view, edit that password at all, they never know what it is, it's being injected behind the scenes into that sign-in form. You can then manage those passwords yourself as an admin, and there's no more riskiness for shared accounts. I like to use the example, things like Twitter or Facebook. A lot of times they don't have enterprise SSO capabilities, so you're sharing out a password to your corporate social media accounts to a handful of people. One of them quits, on bad terms, for example, and now you're rushing to change that credential as quickly as you can and communicate it out to the rest of the marketing team. Well, with something like a OneLogin, no one on the marketing team will ever know that password in the first place. You as the admin get to give people that connector. You say, okay, welcome to our company. You're on marketing team. Based on your role or based on your title, you're going to automatically get access to this nice icon to click on. And you don't know or care, but what's in the background is that it's injecting your credential into a sign-in page. But you're not going to be able to figure that out as an end user or view that password. So that would be our answer to that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Trevor. Anyone else have any questions? Okay, I think we're good there then. Okay, then I'll just do one last reminder. So I sent the document on the chat. Just fill that out so we could ship the Kansas City steaks to you. Again, thank you everybody for attending. Trevor, thank you for presenting to us. We'll be in touch shortly, and I hope everyone has a good day and enjoy the rest of the summer. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.